last of the old bodyguards of our masters served through the war between the states, and we have been to all the reunions, and they have treated us just the same as any other soldier. I'm Marmaduke, Joe Shelby, bodyguard. Done everything they told me to do. So one day, General Marmaduke told me to go and get some chickens. I told him I didn't know what's going on. He started got his gun, looked like I'm ready. Chaps on there. I told him, yes, sir, I'll go right now. Well, you all know how old I am? I'll be 81 years old the first day in August. Damn this.
One of the most famous generals in the Confederate Army was Major General Nathan Bedford Forrest. He had 45 slaves whom he took from his plantation to serve with him during his command.
Probably one of the most elite units in the Confederate military was Nathan Bedford Forrest Cavalry, and specifically one of his units, his own escort company. These were essentially the Green Berets of the Confederate cavalry. They were handpicked, the best troops. They were put into this escort company, and when the fighting really got down to the wire, Forrest would put in his escort company to basically carry the day. Of these handpicked men, about 20% of them were black cavalrymen. That these were some of the bravest, some of the best shots, some of the just most fearsome men that the Confederate cavalry had, and these black and white troopers formed this elite group of Forrest escort.
Forrest was a major slave trader prior to the Civil War. His attitude towards black was one, at best, of paternalism. He viewed blacks as property. After the war, he viewed blacks as having a particular place in society.
And after Reconstruction was over, he actually worked through the Democratic Party to bring black voters in this area into the fold of the Democratic Party. So if anything, he was a man of his times in this area of the country.
My great-grandfather, as a Union soldier here on April 12, 1864, faced black Confederate soldiers under the direction of General Nathan Bedford Forrest. He was also wounded here, and I don't know whether he was wounded by a Confederate soldier or a white Confederate soldier, but I know he was wounded and he was captured here, and from April 12, 1864 until October the 31st, 1865, that is when he returned back to his unit.
I think fundamentally, Forrest was a pragmatist. While slavery was a legal institution, he was willing to use the system and benefit from the system. When the war was over, he recognized slavery was through, that was never coming back, and he went about trying to rebuild his fortune. Forrest addressed some of the black citizens of Memphis after the war and told them that the war was over and that he would advise them to do the same thing that he advised the men who fought with him, and that was to become good citizens and to vote. He said, I will not tell you how to vote, but vote. He was a pragmatist. People don't realize that, and too infrequently give him that credit when it comes to issues particularly involving slavery.
They say he was good to his slaves for one reason. The old dollar sign. That way he get more for them, you see, and get more out of them on his plantations. Well, that's half truth too. I mean, he was good to his slaves, but he was also good to them because he was a humanitarian.
On a large plantation such as Forrest ran, about the only records you get are things that deal with how much food was issued or what kind of work is expected. And the sorts of things that deal with person-to-person relationships are very hard to come by. The one thing that I can tell you from historically valid point is that at the beginning of the war, when Forrest raised his own regiment, he recruited 42 of his own slaves and said, drive wagons for me, drive ambulances for me. At the end of the war, if the Union wins, you'll be free. If the Confederacy wins, I will set you free. During the course of the war, one deserted, the other 41 were with Forrest at the end of the war. I suppose that tells you something about the force of his personality. It does not necessarily directly answer your question, but it certainly tells you that he was a man that was able to win the allegiance of people.
I said to a 45 colored fellow,
Bismillah wa salatu wa salam Rasulullah wa ba'd. In the name of Allah, and the peace and blessings of Allah be upon his last and final messenger. As to what follows, family, friends, foes, haters, and hateettes, welcome back to the features. I greet you all in peace and love and no hatred in my heart. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and blessings of Allah be upon his last and final messenger, and may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon all of you as well. Now, before we begin, please like, please subscribe, please share, please hit me up on Patreon. As you know, we got a lot of haters up in here, and we are talking about another important topic that seems to be largely not being talked about from the wider Muslim community. And this topic is so important because with this particular topic, we can cover so many different issues. Particularly happening in the world that we're living in today, and how it affects Black folk and Muslims directly. And I don't understand why nobody's saying anything. But anyways, right? The clip that we played in the beginning, this clip was of Black Confederates. So for those of you who do not know what a Black Confederate is, then let me explain to you. Okay, during the 1860s, during the buildup of what is known as a Civil War in America, the Civil War was essentially triggered because at that time Abraham Lincoln was with the Whigs Party, the Whigs, which later became the Republican Party. During this time, he essentially was seeing a divide within the colonies at that time. And what was happening was the southern colonies were garnering so much power due to slavery that they were about to succeed the Union. You're all hearing me? And the southern states devised a plan in order to expand westward to further solidify their power. And if they had done that, then they would have successfully broken off from the northern states. So Abraham Lincoln and the Whigs, which later became the Republican Party, they said, we can't have that. We can't have that. Mind you, the power in the South was solidified because of slavery itself. Okay? What does all this have to do with this truck rally? I'm getting to it, okay? Just give me some time. Let me build up here, okay? Mind you, okay? So what Abraham Lincoln did with the then Republican Party in 1865 was put an end to slave, or try to put an end to slavery, rather. And this is what caused the Civil War. He wasn't trying to end slavery because of the goodness of his heart, okay? Let's be very clear about that. He wasn't trying to end slavery because he saw the humanity of Black folk and the oppression that they were going through. Let's be very clear about that, okay? The reason why he was trying to put an end to slavery was to weaken or loosen the grip, the financial grip that the southern states had. Because their entire economy was based and built upon slavery. Mind you, in those times, particularly in the South, Black people outnumbered white people. Okay? They were the more populous of the population. And the clip that we saw in the beginning was an argument from those same Confederates who are alive, the descendants of the Confederates that are alive and well, and preaching this type of cultural, we're standing up for freedom and this type of thing. Those people are saying that slavery was a good thing, and even the Black folk, they fought for their slave masters. That's why I played that clip in the beginning. Y'all hearing me? So we have people who would pick up arms in order to defend their own oppression. And this is nothing new. If you look at the Quran, for example, when we talk about Beni Israel, look at how much Musa alayhi salam had to go through with those people. Because even though their bodies were physically free from the clutches of Fir'aun, their minds were still deeply ingrained into that slavery. They were mentally slaves. So they would be asking Musa all kind of crazy stuff. Like, can you ask your Lord to send us the food that we had in the past, the slave food? And some of y'all happy Negroes are still in love with your slave food. Y'all hearing me? So now we have this trucker convoy. This freedom convoy that's happening in Canada today. And likewise, this freedom convoy, why did it start? You understand? What was the trigger that got the truckers to say, you know what, let's go and do a protest? Okay. The trigger was that the Canadian government made a mandate. And mind you, the vaccine mandates within Canada are largely provincial, right? The federal government really doesn't do much in terms of the mandates, but it's the provincial governments that kind of push these mandates, right? But anyways, nonetheless, the mandate was essentially that any trucker coming in and out of the Ottawa border and whatnot, they must be vaccinated or they will not be able to work. So they said, okay, let's protest. Now, when I first saw this, and I've been telling y'all, right, for a long time on this channel, when we discuss protesting and whatnot, I've always said that protesting should not be a strategy for Muslims at all, for anything, particularly for Muslims. Why? As Black folk, we know very well about protesting. Okay, we know about agent provocateurs, and we know about people coming to commandeer and own the protests, and different agencies coming to bankroll the protests in different directions other than what the original protests. So we know all about that stuff. So protesting shouldn't be a strategy for Muslims, right? Whether you are somebody who believes in protest or somebody who doesn't believe in protest. I'm a person who doesn't believe in protest, and I don't believe that protesting should be a strategy, particularly for Muslims, because that time and energy and that money that you be putting into a protest, you be putting into something that which is actually benefit the people. A protest is not something that benefits the people, right? Rather, it takes people away from their salah. It takes people away from their ibadah and whatnot. And this is like like a type of like a small thing, right? However, in terms of a strategy, it's not good strategizing. It's just not, right? And we've seen time and time again the enemy come and commandeer these protests. Time and time again. So when the Black Lives Matter protest started, who did they send to come to be provocateurs for that protest? Antifa, right? These Antifa and plus police provocateurs coming all over the place, breaking windows, so it's all recorded, going to targets and whatnot, destroying property, so that y'all can say, look at what these black people are doing. But what happened with the Black Lives Matter protests is that the vast majority of the Black Lives Matter protests were white people. So it's very difficult to pin that hooliganism on black people. You understand? However, this is different. Because what you're seeing and what you're witnessing is the same Confederate white supremacist powers poking their head out of their shells like a turtle and revealing themselves. This is what you're seeing happening today. And remember, before when the white supremacists, when the George Floyd protests were happening in the beginning, I said this is the beginning of a civil war. And what you're seeing happening right before your very eyes are white people fighting each other for power in the West. Y'all hearing me? This is white people's arguments. Ain't got nothing to do with us. This is white people's problems. When have white people ever have to fight for their freedom in the West? Particularly in Canada. White immigrants who came to Canada, and mind you, Canada's not a very old country either. It's one of the younger countries. Okay, maybe 100 and just over 150 years old, I believe. Okay. When the colonists will come to Canada, the Canadian government will give white folks up to 400 acres of land free. And as a matter of fact, the Canadian government has always done things to attract immigrants, which is why the Liberal Party in Canada has like a large following. Because Canada is known to be cold, okay? They're known to have a lot of land. Canada's known to have a lot of land, and it's known to be cold. So people, generally, because of the cold, they avoid Canada. But there is a lot of free and even cheap land available in Canada, particularly if you're white. If you go to the prairie provinces today, like right now, in the prairie provinces, it might be minus 45 degrees, minus 40 degrees in the prairies. However, the land there is so incredibly cheap. But those people in the prairies, they're historically on the right-leaning conservative side. You understand? These are the people who are trying to hold on to power. And in this left-right paradigm, not much has changed in terms of the power dynamic. It has always been the right-leaning conservative types who've had the power. They've always had the power. They've always had the land. Whereas the liberal types have always had the support of the people. Okay, so during the Civil War, when Abraham Lincoln was, fighting the Civil War, and then he became the Republican Party, as we mentioned before, the Republican Party back then was the Democratic Party of today. And if you watch the clip in the beginning, you would hear that man mentioning that we urged the slaves to vote Democrat. Democrat back then is what you see as the Republicans today. You understand? That's that power dynamic. So now we have these convoys and these truckers now who are showing the world. And that's not necessarily the truckers, but rather it's the commandeering of this particular protest in order to show the world white people problems. Okay? This is white people problems. And they are fighting each other. So anyway, I want to show you guys a clip just to prove my point. Okay? 1 second, y'all.
Convoy appears to be gaining momentum. Ontario police say around 400 vehicles left Thunder Bay heading towards Toronto, where many more were waiting to join the procession to the nation's capital.
I'm not a big fan of the mandates. I think they pushed it a little too far, and I think there's a lot of people here that have the same message, and I think it's a positive one.
We're here on the north edge of the city of Toronto, and take a look at this. There are hundreds of people gathered here, many of them with Canadian flags, many of them carrying signs condemning vaccine mandates and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. A lot of truckers, of course, but a lot of ordinary vehicles as well. A lot of people here who aren't truckers, aren't related to the trucking industry at all, and a real sign that this movement has become about much more than truckers and vaccine mandates. The protest appears to have spiraled into a catch-all for countless other issues.
It started with a fairly specific concern about COVID-related mandates and has expanded out exponentially from that to, include far-right concerns around globalization, multiculturalism, anti-government, anti-Trudeau sentiment.
We are convoying right to Ottawa.
This Sudbury man, one of the self-described organizers of the protest, appears to have previously encouraged followers to loot grocery stores that asked for proof of vaccination. He's listed politicians who were not born in Canada and said he planned to vandalize a Black Lives Matter mural, for which he later apologized.
So I want y'all to remember that guy, Jordan Lafacci, right? I believe his name is Jason Lafacci, okay? This is one of the important figures in organizing this protest. This dude is an alt-right dude out here in Canada, okay? An online personality. He's like the Alex Jones. He's like kind of like Alex Jones wannabe out here, okay? And what is he doing? You see, you got to understand how the enemy thinks. Okay? As long as the enemy is fighting, the fight of the enemy is righteous. The fight of the enemy is for freedom. The fight of the enemy is for the rights of the people. But when you fight back, you become a terrorist. You become a criminal. You become, if you destroy property in a protest, you become a looter, a hooligan. When the enemy destroys property, like Daniel Hakikuchu said, they're peaceful protesters. Well, he called them that. The ones who broke in the Capitol, he called them peaceful protesters. Osambilla, anybody can look on his whatchamacallit, his Telegram and see it. And we put that out there anyways. You understand? These are the descendants of the people who stole the land of the descendants of the people who were here to begin with. They're the same people. Ain't nothing changed except now they're just coming out open about it because of Donald Trump. Y'all hearing me? And then you got some, anyways, you got some of these. Anyways, we're not going to talk about them too much. But the whole point is that this is what's happening right before your very eyes in Canada. Y'all hearing me? It turned into a protest about vaccine mandates, and it went from that to Justin Trudeau, to rights, to freedom, our this, our that. What does the Confederate flag have to do with Canada? Do y'all know what a Confederate flag has to do with Canada? Besides a whole bunch of nothing? Anyway, let's continue watching now.
Apologized. This expert in conspiracy theories says other members have also called for the protests to become Canada's January 6th, a reference to the crowds that stormed the U.S. Capitol last year.
I would like to see our own January 6th event. See some of those truckers plow right through that 16-foot wall. None of us, of course. I just like to see it.
Is this a peaceful movement that's being hijacked by others?
Welcome to the real world. Welcome to the real world. For those of y'all, who are just absolutely enamored by Zaddy and them. This is who Zaddy is. They want their own January 6th event. They know what it's about. They know exactly what they're saying. It's y'all who keep making excuses for these devils, man. You love the enemy way too much. That's the problem. These people are not messing around. They're not playing around at all. They want a January 6th event here in Canada. Anyways, let's continue now.
Their groups.
Well, that's really hard to say. Everyone does have the right to protest, but there are other actors who may be engaged who see this as an opportunity for something else.
The conservative finance critic accused the media of focusing on a few bad apples.
But that doesn't mean we disparage the thousands of hardworking, law-abiding, and peaceful truckers who, quite frankly, have kept all of you alive the last 2 years by filling your grocery shelves.
But Ottawa police are concerned enough that they're preparing.
Now, I want y'all to remember something about the enemy, okay? The enemy will disparage themselves in order to carry out their goals. They've had a long history of doing this. They will talk that talk. You understand? They're experts at talking that talk. And y'all gullible Negroes just eat it up. So he's talking about a few bad apples. How many times have we heard this? How many times have we heard this story about a few bad apples? Do you know how many police officers in the States, white police officers that is, that have been arrested, tried, and convicted of the murder of unarmed black people? Do you know how many in the history of America? I'll give you a guess. Let's give you one guess of how many. Because we're talking about a few bad apples today, right? Just guess how many white police officers who got arrested, convicted, tried, and convicted of murdering innocent black people. Do you know how many? Tiga says maybe 20. Tika says maybe 20. How many? How many, y'all? Somebody else guess. Y'all don't know? These few bad apples, you know how many got arrested from these few bad apples since the time America started? One. One white police officer in the entire history of America got arrested, tried, and convicted of the murder of a black, innocent black person. One. You know who that was? Come on, talk to me now. I'll give you another guess who it was. Because we're talking about a few bad apples today, right? Who was it, people? Put it in the chat, please. Who was it? Do you know who it was? Thank you. Thank you, Psych for Press. Derek Chauvin. Derek Chauvin. Now I'm going to ask you, why do you think Derek Chauvin, out of the history of this devilish country, happened to be the only person ever convicted, tried and convicted for the murder of a black person? Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is? Because we're talking about a few bad. See, they know language. The difference is y'all don't know language. You move when the enemy tells you to move. You say the things that the enemy tells you to say. You take the positions that the enemy gives you. Y'all hearing me? You don't have an independent position. That's why it's easy for some of y'all to follow people like Daniel Hikikuchu and whatnot. And your white zaddy dies and whatnot. It's easy for you. Because you don't have a position. You don't have an independent position. Every position that you take because the enemy gave you that position. Like the enemy giving you this position right now. It's just a few bad apples. And then some of y'all are going to take that and repeat it. Yeah, you know what? It's just a few bad apples. We out here fighting for freedom. You don't look at the history of your enemy. You just ignore all the dirt that they've done been doing for who knows how many hundreds of years. You ignore all that. Y'all hearing me? This is who we're dealing with. Anyway, let's continue.
for a range of scenarios, including the potential for violence.
It's not just your regular protests coming to the city. So people are concerned. I will await as we know more and see more. I understand, and in other areas we have not seen violence, but that was not their target. The target is Ottawa.
And Jeff Semple is with me now. Jeff, you spent the day out there with the protesters. What was the atmosphere like?
It was a real mixed bag, Donna, I have to tell you. There were a lot of truckers, as you saw there, and their supporters who were, quite polite and positive, talking about the fact that they're essential workers and feel that they're being unfairly punished by the vaccine mandate. But there were also a lot of other people and a lot of angry people. And a lot of that anger was directed at us as journalists. Myself and my colleagues here faced a lot of verbal abuse all day. And in fact, one local news crew called police here at one point after they said that one of the protesters tried to drive their cars into one of the reporters while he was doing his work. So some very tense moments today, fueling fears that those tensions may bubble over when that convoy arrives to Parliament Hill.
Now, you see, family, why this is important, because those of us who are Canadian, we know Canadians have no history of violence against media. None whatsoever. And what you got to understand, what you got to understand is that the alt-right was actually a Canadian invention. It didn't start in the States. It started in Canada. It started in Canada, I believe, in the late 80s or something like that. I put this out there before as well, right, with the Reform Party and Stephen Harper in them. And actually, Stephen Harper, as racist as he is, right, he had to leave the party because he wasn't racist enough, okay? But that's when it started. And it was exported to the States. All this stuff was exported to the States, and it blew up in the States because, Americans are very hardcore with their white supremacy. Okay? They are very, very, very hardcore with their white supremacy. So, but in Canada, Canada's very civil. Canadians are civil. You understand? A Canadian white supremacist will be real smooth about it because Canada's big and wide and has got lots of land. And as long as the white supremacist got his land and, his vehicles and his guns or whatever, you're not really concerned about what's going on the outside like that. You understand? So what is it that put them over the edge? You see, these vaccine mandates, we all know that there's more to these vaccines and the cocoa than what meets the eye. There's a lot of profiteering, a hell of a lot of profiteering from pharmaceutical companies and whatnot. However, again, if you go back to the Civil War, like what we mentioned, right? The historical landlords have been losing money because of these mandates. The ones who are the owners of the property of the West, because everything's shut down. So when they're talking about fighting for freedom, they're not talking about fighting for freedom for you, Negro. You're a little bit too dark for them to fight for their freedom. When have you ever seen any history of these people fighting for your freedom? When they say we're fighting for freedom, they mean they're fighting for their freedom to own you. And they are very happy to have you participate in their in-house fight with their family, as long as you're on their side. Y'all hearing me? And just like the Black Confederates, we're all too happy to go in front of a camera and talking about defending their masters. And they said it in those exact words. They said it in those exact words. They were too happy to talk about defending their masters. Let me play it for you again, just in case you missed it. Y'all are just as happy to be fighting for your masters. And you look crazy. You look nuts. You look crazy talking about, like, sending me all these anti-masker stuff, all this anti-mask, anti-vax, anti-this. You look crazy. I'm sorry. I told you time and time again, you look nuts. That ain't our fight. If you don't want to take the vaccine, don't take the vaccine. I'm not taking the vaccine. But I mean, do you think I'm crazy enough to start sending anti-masker material? What do I look like to you? I lived through MERS. I lived through SARS. The mask is a conspiracy against our freedom. No, fool, it's not a conspiracy against your freedom. That is a fight between the North and the South. White people's North and white people's South. Ain't got nothing to do with you. Let those crackers roast each other. As simple as that. Let them duke it out. Why are you involving yourself in something that don't concern you? Y'all look crazy, man. Want y'all to listen to this. Listen to what this Negro said.
We are the last of the old bodyguards of our masters turned through the wall between the states.
The last of who? Who is he calling himself? The last of who? The last of the bodyguard protecting who? Our old who? So y'all think we're tripping here. You think there aren't some black-looking people who are hell-bent on fighting for white people's freedom at the expense of your own freedom? Just like Muslims, same thing. You think these people don't exist?
We are the last of the old bodyguards of our masters turned through the wall between the states.
Who's his masters? Who are his masters? Is he talking masters like Rabbil Alameen? That master? Is that what he's thinking? Oh, they're tripping, man. He is happy to protect slavery. Very happy to protect his slave masters. And ironically, the majority of y'all are very happy to protect your slave masters today. It is no different. How do you know this, Bilal? Let me show you what some of y'all Muslims were doing while this convoy was taking place. You think it's jokes? You want to see what some of y'all Muslims were doing? Yeah, exactly. It's Uncle Ruckus. That is Uncle Ruckus. Let me show y'all what you Muslims were doing. While this convoy was happening, this is what y'all Muslims were doing, okay? You think it's a joke. These people are playing three-dimensional chess. You still playing checkers, man. Y'all think this is jokes. You guys have no clue. This is what y'all Muslims were doing while this was going on. Vigil in Ottawa to mark mosque attack canceled due to safety concerns around convoy protest. You can't make this crap up. Like, you cannot make this crap up. Okay? Vigil to remember victims on 5th anniversary of attack will now be held, virtually. Okay, I'm going to get to it. And I know some of y'all are a little bit confused, but we're going to get to it. Okay, just let me read a little bit. Okay, this is the statues in honor. Okay, this is a memorial to 6 men killed in a 2017 attack on Quebec City Mosque. And an in-person event in Ottawa to remember the victims was canceled on Saturday and moved online. You cannot make this crap up. And it made the news. It made the news. Do you know what's happening here? I didn't even know this. First of all, which Muslim asked for this anyways? Okay. 5 years ago, white supremacist dude, typical Trumper, like atypical Trumper. Atypical Trumper. You understand? Goes to a mosque, a masjid, and shoots it up in Montreal. Right? 6 men were killed in that masjid. Rahimahumullah. Okay? 2017. Okay? And the Muslims thought it would be a good idea to complain about the Freedom Convoy because they couldn't hold their vigil. And remember, we talked about this many times, about these Muslims who put themselves forward, speaking for all of us, and making us look bad, making us look terrible. First of all, who asked for this memorial, number one? Is this from our religion? You understand? These 5 or these 6 men, rahimahumullah, we hope they receive the death of shuhada. That's what we hope. We hope they receive the death of shuhada. There's no bigger honor than that. You're not going to out-honor that by doing the haram. Building memorials for these people. Might I remind you how shirk started? What were the origins of shirk? Before the time of Noah, between the time of Noah and after the time of Adam, there were righteous men. And the people said, you know what? When they passed, they said, you know what? We should build something to remember them by. The same thing that those people did to introduce shirk is the same thing that these people are doing for these Muslims. Y'all hearing me? And on top of that, making an annual event like an Eid or something. And on top of that, complaining to white people about other white people. You can't make this crap up, man. This is crazy. This is so crazy. This is total madness. Okay, let's read. An in-person vigil to remember the victims of the fatal attack in Quebec City Mosque exactly 5 years ago has been canceled, with the organizers citing safety concerns arising out of the presence of a convoy protesting vaccine mandates in Ottawa on Saturday. Okay. The event, organized by the group Canadians United Against Hate. Anyways, do I have to say it, man? Do I have to? Do I have to say it? Said it had been expecting more than 100 people at the only in-person event in the region organized to remember the January 29th, 2017 attack, which left 6 people dead and 19 wounded. Muslims are doing this. And then you wonder why we're getting buffed up all over the place. Jazakallah khair, Brother Abdullah Zenji. Hayakumullah. May Allah reward you and bless you and multiply for you 1,000-fold. Ameen. This is 100% madness, man. Can you imagine? Okay, look at I want you all to look at these stones for a little bit. Do you think these stones are cheap? Do you think they're cheap stones? They look like cheap stones to you? What about this engraving? They didn't just engrave in English, but they engraved in Arabic too. You understand? And it was a beautiful job. Very well done, beautiful job. Now imagine the money they put into the engraving and the cutting of these stones and polishing and making them nice and smooth and smoothing up the edges and everything like that. This takes work, and this takes work. And these stones look heavy. They don't look light by any stretch of the imagination. Now, imagine the good that money could have done if it was put somewhere else. You understand what I'm saying? But that's how the Muslims think. The Muslims, when they come over here from their Eastern countries or whatever, they're so happy to be in white people's country that they want to participate and act like them. And even the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned this in authentic hadith, that you're going to follow disbelievers step by step and inch by inch. Even if they were to go into a hole of a lizard, you run right by them, right behind them, following them to that hole in that lizard. This is what they're doing. This is what they're doing. Can you imagine 1400-year tradition of Islam? And I've never even seen Muslims do this until this thing happened in Canada. But you're going to put yourself forward on behalf of Muslims to do this and then order a vigil and whatnot. I mean, this is craziness, man. This is just craziness. This is madness. Who asked you to represent us? Like, where are you getting this from? Is there a hadith about this? Is there an ayah in the Quran about this? From what I know, there are hadith against this, very explicitly against this. That's what I know. That's from what I know. This is, and now, what you got to understand, because y'all don't know the enemy, right? When the enemy sees this, what you are actually doing is giving them arguments and fuel and weaponry against Muslims. Because that money that you use for these stones, you could have put it into a dawah program. You could have used it to feed the poor. You could have done so many things with it. And that would have been way more honorable, because these 6 dead, we hope for them the death of Shuhada. If they have the death of Shuhada, they're in a way better situation than any one of us. You don't need to build a stone to remember them. This is, I don't know. I don't know what to tell y'all. But I'm gonna post a link if anybody wants to join me. But there's so many things that we can cover from this protest, from this civil war that white people are having within themselves, right? We covered how the Muslim reaction once again is weak and pathetic, and it just you look crazy. You're doing things on our behalf that you should not be doing. Period. Nobody asked you for a memorial, and nobody asked you to put yourself out there like that for this memorial, and then tell the world that only 100 people coming out on top of that. And that 100 people, you know what I mean? They probably couldn't even come enough money for one of these stones, let alone all three of them. This is nuts, man. You make us look terrible. Sonic Rahmatullahi Barakatuh, brother Adam.
Welcome, Salam.
How you doing, bro?
I'm all right.
Alhamdulillah. What you got for us, brother?
So I think I'm gonna take middle road.
Go ahead.
So I'm not a person that supports protesting in general, like this out in the streets kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of going against the mandate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, while I don't support whatever this is, because half the time when there's something big like this that gets a lot of attention, there's something behind it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like the reason why you'll get a lot of people going behind it is because it's like there's no other choice for somebody that's against the mandate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why something like that would gain support.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, who is the power here? Who's the power in this situation?
In this situation, it's still the government.
It's still the government.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Because if they wanted to shut this down, they could.
Yeah, of course they could. You understand? But again, these people, they're not like us. They're incredibly intelligent, right? And they know how to use a lot of psychological tricks and ploys in order to push what they want anyways. Right?
Exactly.
The vaccine mandate, in my opinion, is not about public health at all. It's about profiteering. You understand?
It's like even if it was public health, that ship sailed a long time ago when once everybody that was vaccinated was still getting Omicron and whatever else.
Yeah.
So that whole ship has sailed. So keeping the mandates in place, you can see clearly it's about something completely different.
It's about something completely different. So once you understand that, and you know that historically protests have not actually done anything, right? Unless it's on a large scale, like the George Floyd protest or the Watts riots, or something like that, or the whatchamacallit, the Rodney King riots. When it's on that scale, the government will move.
Yeah, those when the key difference in that is when you have to say riot.
Exactly.
When you have to say riot, then you know that
then the enemy will move. They'll move.
Yeah,
They'll
it's not controlled opposition.
Yeah, because they're afraid of losing a grip on their power. You understand? So, and that's why whatchamacallit, what's his name? Derek Chauvin got arrested and tried and convicted. That's the only reason why. You understand? Because they knew if that didn't happen, then something bigger was going to come.
Oh, no doubt.
You know what I mean? So, but at the end of the day, these people are the power, in this situation. And what is incumbent upon Muslims, right, is to get closer to Allah so that we can, get help from Allah so that we can be the power. But Muslims aren't thinking like that. The Muslims from the East, particularly, they're positioning the Muslims as a type of marginalized group. And that's why they're always talking about Islamophobia, because they want biscuits from the enemy. Not that they're not trying to, they can't even, a lot of these Islamic, I don't like to talk about Islamic leadership like that, because they are who they are, and we have them, and that's what we got, right? So we should support them. I believe that. I believe in supporting the Islamic leadership, right? But I have to say, coming from, particularly if they're coming from the East, like Pakistan and India and Egypt and whatnot, and they come over here and they come with their big mouths and little dreams, you know what I mean? And so they can't see Canada or the States becoming Muslim countries like that. Meanwhile, it was the Black community, particularly in the States, that was pushing Dawah without the help of the wider Muslim community, because they were afraid of losing their biscuits. And I put it out there. Remember about Malcolm X and his funeral? Did you see that one?
I can't remember it.
Okay, so basically, when Malcolm X died, it was a Baptist church that handled his funeral arrangements. You know why?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, because
they couldn't rely.
Yeah, because the Muslims at those times were saying that Malcolm X wasn't a Muslim.
Yeah.
And they themselves were afraid of losing a biscuit from their white zaddies. These are the same Muslims now today that are brave enough to speak about the Nation of Islam and how Malcolm X was a legend. The same ones.
Yeah.
And they're the ones who want to tell us what to do, bro. And they're just looking crazy. And I'm sorry to say it, but they're looking nuts. You know what I mean? But Brother Abu Sufyan.
Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh.
The legend himself.
Nah, just a brother from the block. How you doing, man?
How's everything?
Good. Alhamdulillah. How's everyone?
Good.
Wallah,
you know who this is, right?
Sorry, brother?
You know who this is, right?
Adam, no?
Yeah, Damri.
Hey! MashaAllah, guy. Your voice changed, huh? MashaAllah, big boy, eh?
Yeah.
MashaAllah, here. MashaAllah. Jazakallah. We'll catch up, though, man. MashaAllah, it's good to have you here with us.
Yeah.
Akhi, Sheikh Bilal.
Yeah.
I have 2 points, Akhi, about this whole thing. It shows you, I'm going to show you how silly it is, eh? Okay. You know what's the first amendment for in the American Constitution?
The first one I can't remember. You have to.
It's like the freedom of speech, right?
Freedom of speech. Yeah, the First Amendment is freedom of speech.
Yeah. So what about the one in Canada?
I can't remember. What is it?
I can read it to you right now.
Okay, go ahead. Is it for freedom to assemble?
Hold on, okay. This is ridiculous. I just found out this today, bro.
Okay, go ahead.
Hold on. Okay, get ready for this. It says, Section 1 reads as follows. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom guarantees the rights and freedoms set out in the subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. So you know what's the difference? You see the difference?
No, what's the difference?
The difference here is limited. In America, it's not. The laws can change, and you have no freedom, reasonable limits. You see?
Well, you know,
but because they forget that this country is a monarchy, it's still under England. It's a Commonwealth.
Well,
America, they fought the British out. That's why they have the Independence Day. We have Canada's Day. You see, so a lot of these politicians, the PPC, the PPC, right? The NDP, the Conservative Party, the Liberal, they all know this law. That's why a lot of them are, they're having a position against these Freedom Convoy guys, because they know the law doesn't support them. You see that?
Yep.
So like even a lot of these guys are, oh, freedom, this freedom. Yeah, but your freedom is, as the charter says, reasonable limits.
Yes. Yeah.
So
A lot of Canadians
that's why in
tend to
America it's
forget that they're
different. That's
not
why in America they're
American.
more bold.
Yeah. And,
You know what I
and
mean?
that's a fact. A lot of Canadians think, and this type of American thinking is something that's relatively new. It kind of
Thank you
started,
very much. They're thinking like
it started mostly
America,
in the
but
90s.
it's
It
not the
started
same.
picking up, right? And now since Donald Trump, we have white people losing their minds, right? It's particularly in Canada, talking the same type of rhetoric that's coming out of the States. You know what I mean? But mind you, with Canada was started essentially to be an Aryan country, and that's what John A. Macdonald, he actually said explicitly, right? The first president of a prime minister, rather, of Canada. The very first prime minister of Canada explicitly said that it was supposed to be a land for the Aryan people, meaning white people.
Just like Australia. Initially, Australia was the same.
Yeah.
They were trying to keep it just for the, the pure white bread.
Yeah. So when you have people talking about freedom,
not that way, you know.
When you have people talking about freedom, you have to know what they mean by freedom, because their freedom means your slavery.
Exactly.
You got to understand that. I'm reading this book. I don't have it here, but it's basically what's it called again? They Were Her Property, right? There's a book called They Were Her Property. It's about the white woman's involvement in slavery, okay? And how white women, they themselves benefited off of slavery.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you see how white women, they like to weaponize their tears or whatever. Whenever something goes wrong, they start crying. You know what I mean? They want to accuse anybody of anything. They just start crying, and you know what I'm saying? White women, I watched a video from Daniel Hakikachu the other day, right? Like a couple of weeks ago. And he was saying, and it was translated, and he was saying that the feminist movement, right, was essentially started because to spread around the world and all this kind of stuff, and these white people, I mean, these people were spreading, the liberals were spreading feminism internationally from the 1800s and whatnot. I'm like, man, you are on some revisionist history here. Wow. Revisionist history, and this thing got translated, okay? But anyways, the whole point behind the feminist movement, I mentioned this time and time again, was because of Black people. And people are not seeing the connection because they don't know what was happening in the States during slavery. They don't understand what was happening, right? So what was happening was when white people were coming during this period and they would get married, right? It was the law in those days that whatever property the white woman had would automatically go to her husband.
Yeah.
You understand?
Right.
So then,
that's why they carried the last name of the husband, right?
Exactly. So the woman and her property now belong to the husband. You understand? So, and what do you think the most liquid property was during this time? What
Slavery?
was it? What was the slaves? It was slaves, obviously, right?
Yeah, slaves.
Slaves were the most liquid transferable property at this time. So, anyways, white women started to push back by going to court and building things called anuptial agreements. You know how you have prenuptial agreements right now? Right?
Yeah.
In those days, it was anuptials. Anuptial agreements. Now we have prenuptials for the men, but those times with anuptial agreements. And the anuptial agreements were written even by their fathers and whatnot, because what was happening was a lot of these inept white men would marry these women. They would give their property to these men, and the men would squander it and lose all of the property. Right? So now they're getting these anuptial agreements so that the woman can keep the property even if something happens to their marriage. That's how it all started.
Okay.
That's how it
this
all
thing goes
started.
way back.
It goes way back. You understand? Feminism wasn't a thing in Europe. It was a thing in the West that spread out throughout the world because of this ownership of property issue.
Wow.
You understand?
It goes back to economy.
Economics.
Yeah.
Economics. So I'm reading this book
Always
now.
back to that money.
Yeah, exactly. I'm reading this book, and it's going through example after example after example, real life example of how these white women would fight and go to court and even go to the slave auctions, send people to slave auctions to purchase slaves and whatnot for themselves. You understand? Because you got to understand the stock market, even the word stock. Where did this word come from? It came from stock, meaning that actual stock, the slave stock, the livestock. You understand? The trading and insurance companies all came from slavery. The building of insurance companies came. People don't know this stuff, and they just talking, and they don't know what they're talking about because they don't read books. They just listen to people off of
The only
YouTube.
thing they miss is the human stock.
Yeah, exactly. The livestock, right? So now you're going to trade livestock.
Actually, yeah, you're right. It's live.
You understand?
Yeah, they don't call it cattle.
The American system of slavery was different than the South American system. Why? Because the Americans, right? They were getting the trickle down slaves.
Yeah.
You understand? The whole slave route will go first from Africa to South America. You know what I mean? To go to Brazil and British and French Guyana and whatnot, and these type of places in South America. Then we go to the West Indies, right? And go to the islands and whatnot, the slave ships, and then it will finally reach the southern part of America, like Florida or whatnot. You understand? So they're getting the last bit of the slaves, right? The very last picks in the States, right? And that's why they started breeding slaves in the States. That's why they started breeding black people.
Wow.
Because they weren't getting all the, they weren't getting the full boats. You know what I mean? They're getting the last bit of the boats, of the slaves. And they were breeding them so much so that in the States,
because of the shipments.
Exactly. Well, not because of the sickness, but the first pick will go to the Portuguese and the Spanish, right? Because they were all in the South American parts, right? So Brazil was Portugal, Guyana was French at one point, and there's Portuguese Guyana. And then there's other places in the West Indies. They go to Trinidad or whatever. Trinidad was Spanish, and then it became British, right? And then they kind of slowly moved up north until they finally reached like Florida and these other.
But they didn't really hit Central America, right?
What do you mean Central
They
America?
didn't really go to like Central America or Mexico and stuff, right?
Yeah, of course there are slaves in Central America, of course, right? But anyways, like the whole point.
What they call them, Afro Latinos.
Yeah, of course. Even in Mexico, you'll find entire communities of black people, black Mexicans, right? But my whole point was the reason why I mentioned this, right, was because these people, right, when they're talking about feminism and whatnot and liberalism, they don't understand why it started. They don't understand, the history behind it or anything like that. And they're trying to peg it as something that's attacking the world or something like that. You know what I mean? And that's not the point of it. This is a fight between white people, right? These are white people problems. You understand? Yeah. And when black people were given the right to vote after the Civil War, guess who starts coming out? You start seeing the rise of the Ku Klux Klan, right? you started seeing the women's suffrage movement. Why the women's suffrage? Why? Why were women all of a sudden? Why were these white women all of a sudden complaining about their white man? Because they didn't want the slaves that they owned to have the right to vote before they did. Ta-da! That's what it was about. Okay. Ta-da! That's why you started seeing women's suffrage and all this kind of stuff. You want our slaves to get the right to vote before us, the white woman? Oh, hell no. But y'all don't know that, man. And then you're running to these dudes who are all over YouTube. You know what I'm saying? It's just a bunch of craziness happening all over the place in the Muslim community, man. It's just, I don't even know how to explain it. It's
still relevant. You don't like a topic today.
Yeah, you're gonna have to repeat all of that, bro. We missed everything you just said. Your connection's
right?
pretty.
This freedom convoy.
Can y'all hear me?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, the connection's pretty bad.
I can hear you.
Can you hear me? Yeah, but anyway, anybody can go get the book. They were her property, right? And you can read all the stuff that was happening back then. You know what I mean? I'm reading that book right now. It's one of the books I'm reading right now. But it's just crazy, man. It's crazy, and history is just repeating itself today. The same things that was going back then. If you read what was happening in the Civil War back then, with the feminist movement, what was called women's suffrage back then. Women's suffrage. If you read what's talking about the Confederates, this is now the Confederates of today are now these freedom fighters, these freedom people. You know what I mean? It's all the same stuff. It's the same stuff. Even the language the same. The words are using the same. You know what I mean? Like Uncle Ruckus talking about, we are the bodyguards of our old slave masters and whatnot. You see what I'm saying? And then you have these silly Negroes talking about, oh, you know, we're just trying to fight for our freedoms. Like you're saying the same thing. You know what I mean? So, anyways, brothers and sisters, we've been going on for about almost an hour and 20 now. But Jazakallah khair for everybody who participated. Like, subscribe, share. Hit me up on Patreon. And subhanakallah bihamdik wa shadallah ant wa astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.